Hello Channel NITT viewers, I am DS and welcome to another episode on Channel NITT. And in this episode, we're going to continue to talk about body language. So in one of our previous episodes, we shared with our viewers the concept of personal space and how it can be used to your favor to interpret if a person may be interested in you, at least at the subconscious level. However, before you get all excited, this episode is about something that you need to take note of before you jump into interpreting body language. So studies have shown that men particularly are prone to over-interpreting body language. And this is what we call the fundamental attribution error, FAE. The fundamental attribution error is the tendency for human beings to attribute observed behaviors to disposition explanation instead of other possible situational explanations. So for example, a man is more likely to think that a woman is interested because the woman is tilting forward while she is speaking to him. However, there could be other situational explanations, such as maybe the woman is having some back pain. So you may have read somewhere that when a person is lying, he may not tend to maintain eye contact. Well, to an extent this is true. However, not maintaining eye contact is not a definite indicator that someone is lying. Somebody may be actually thinking about something at home that is bothering him. That is why he's not focused and therefore not maintaining a proper eye contact. So there might be a lot of situational reasons. So as human beings, we may tend to over-interpret certain behaviors that we see, and we think that it is a sign of interest or the sign of dishonesty. So the psychological term used to explain this is called fundamental attribution error. Does that mean that trying to read body language is not going to be productive? Of course, you can still take body language into consideration. It is going to give you a huge advantage. However, you first have to learn something, and this is very important. It is called baselining. Baselining. So what is baselining? So before you interpret anybody's body language, you have to first establish the person's baseline. So some people are naturally more touchy than other people. They just like to touch you when they speak. That doesn't mean anything. So you first have to establish a person's normal baseline.
Because you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble.
And a person will display his or her normal baseline when they are relaxed. So what do? Before you assess a person's body language and try to interpret his or her intention from there, first try to establish a baseline. So when this person is relaxed, how often does she gesticulate? How often does he or she lean forward? Is the head tilted left or towards the right? How often does she blink at you? How often does he nod? If it is also possible for you to observe this particular person in communication with other people, then you will have much more information to decide. So when a person is entirely, totally relaxed, what you can do is to observe the person's head. When we are relaxed, we may have a tendency to lean forward, tilt left or right when we are listening, depending on what type of learner we are. Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners. So all this will reflect in the body language when one is relaxed. So it is very possible for a visual learner to lean forward because he or she needs to capture in more visual stimuli. And for the auditory learner, they might tilt their head because they need to listen to the information that is being relayed.
You won't listen.
So besides looking at the head, the next place you need to look at when a person is relaxed is the chest.
I wanted to borrow those keys.
In this case, of course, you have to try to look discreetly if this is a new friend or an acquaintance. However, if this person is your bosom friend, however, if this person is your bosom friend, then just focus on the bosom. So for different people, at their baseline, their body may be upright, it could be slightly slumped. What about the shoulders? So when looking at a person's chest, take note of their shoulders position, chest whether it's in or out, and the entire posture. Now the third thing to look at to establish baseline is the person's arms or limbs if you have it. So are they folded? So some people just like to fold their limbs for some reason or another because they might be cold or they are defensive, but it is just a natural posture for them, so it does not mean anything. Only when you start to talk to a person you have established at the baseline, this person rarely folds his arm. However, you might have touched on something that is sensitive and the person starts folding his arms, then this might be an indicator that the person may be anxious or has become defensive. This is also why you need to establish baseline, right? So some people like to sit like this, some people like to do this. So just establish the baseline first to see whether all sorts of tendencies may be normal. So since we are talking about tendencies, I have a bonus for you. Besides looking at the baseline from the head, chest and arms point of view, you can also look at a person's habits or tendencies. Some people like to bite something when they are talking. Some people like to tap their fingers. Some people like to crack their knuckles. So some people just like to hear the kak sound when they crack their knuckles, right? So if this is part of the baseline, it does not mean anything. So other forms of tendencies could be things like fidgeting, trying to flick their hair, or play with their hair, or bite their lips. If you want to call it a bad habit, you may call it a bad habit, but this is the particular signature of that particular person if this is what he or she prefers to do even at baseline level. So when establishing a baseline, you also need to take note of certain possible biases that we may have when trying to establish a baseline. So one such bias that we sometimes ignore is culture. So in some cultures, such as the Japanese culture, people tend to be more reserved and polite when communicating. So their body language may also be more reserved and restricted. And that is their baseline. So you may be talking to a Japanese person and it does not mean anything if he or she appears to be very cold and distant. It is part of the culture. Conversely, you may meet somebody who comes from a culture where digging the nose in front of others is perfectly fine. So if you see somebody digging his or her nose in front of you, it may be because of their culture, because their culture accepts this and thinks that it is normal. It does not mean that the person is so comfortable in front of you, likes you so much as to demonstrate their behavior right in front of you. The second thing that we need to take note of when baselining is appearance. So sometimes appearance can be deceiving and may mislead us. So take for example, baby faces are usually very misleading. So if you see a person regardless of gender who owns a baby face, you might also be inclined to type this person or interpret this person as a very innocent person. this is an obvious bias. And this is also why sometimes we get a shock when we hear that some celebrities are involved in sex scandals. Why? Because they look so innocent with their baby faces. So some of these celebrities may look so pure because of their face that they don't look as if they even know what sex is. Oh, but then, havoc. Okay, this video is going to be a very important precursor for our future videos on body language, because before you go so deep into interpreting body language, you first have to know the concept of baselining and fundamental attribution error. We will be producing more videos on body language, and if you have not subscribed, do consider subscribing. We have a lot of other psychological and personality type videos as well, so do check it out if you have not. So I hope you have enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you again in my next episode. Goodbye!